Hello, in the second part of the tutorial dealing with the Fibonacci series, we are going to implement the code that we saw originally. This was the original code in terms of vector variables. First, notice something about this series. Okay, the problem says the following. After I define 0 and 1, after I have set the initial two values, okay, the series is essentially this term is the sum of these two guys. This term is the sum of these two guys. This is the sum of these two guys and so on. So in fact, if I had this variable out, okay, so the variable was out, what we have is out, this is essentially the element 3, right? We have conceptually the following. Element I, and I'm just writing this to explain a concept. This is not, MATLAB will not like it. Out I is equal to, that is the current value of I is equal to the previous value of I, the previous two values of I. Okay, so it's essentially this is what we are doing. Okay, what we have to do now is implement this in a script. So I have done this in the next version of the script. So this is my script to do the flow diagram, and I'm going to use predefined vectors, okay, and make MATLAB happy. So I have the same code, input the number n, initialize x and y, sorry, uh, initialize x and y. Okay, I have initialized x and y. Then what I do is I'm going to predefine a vector. So when I say out say zeros 2, MATLAB is going to give me a 2 by 2 matrix of zeros. What I want is a 1 by n matrix of zeros. So I say 1 by 2 is so on, and now n is a variable. Okay, so I define a vector of some size n, and n is being controlled by the input. So this is going to be the matrix is then going to be allocated based on the number that you specify n. I'm going to define the first two terms, out1 and out2. Going back here, these are the first two elements. That's essentially those two elements. And if my n were 1 or 2, I don't really have to do this entire loop. I'm going to write a more general code, okay? And this is slightly different from the original Fibonacci 1 version that you saw earlier, okay? So this says, if n equal to 1, notice that this equality, this is the test for equality, this is assignment. If I had equals like that, that is assignment. This is an assignment statement. This is a test for equality. MATLAB doesn't like it. Okay, it says invalid syntax, possibly here. In fact, this should be a test for equality. If n equal to 1 or 2, I am done because I already had the original vector and I've already pre-allocated those two numbers. I said display the output vector. This symbol here is this way of formatting here is known as slicing. Okay, we are slicing a matrix. So I have my original, oops, okay, let's go here. My vector is like that. I want to see a part of this vector. Let's say I want to see this part of the vector. That is element 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to see elements 4 and 5. Okay, I can do it that way. Now let's say I want to see elements 4, 5, 6, 7. I do that. Okay, so this is essentially I'm looking at the first n elements of this vector, and the first two have already been predefined. Okay, if n were greater than 2, okay, and I'm obviously not testing for n negative and so on, because no reasonable person would want to have a series with negative number of terms. Okay, maybe you should include a check there, but for our purposes we are not going to do it. Okay, if n is different from 1 and 2, we have an else statement. Okay, then we say for I some counter from 3 to n, because the first two were defined and I'm interested only in the next elements. 3 going from I going from 3 to n, out of I, the ith element, is essentially this part of my code that I wrote here. Okay, the iteration that I was mentioning earlier is the earlier value, the first preceding value, and the second preceding value, and I terminate it with a semicolon here. Then I say, then essentially it's the same way as before. The first d terms of the Fibonacci series are, okay, so on. So now let's save this. Let's clear the screen just for readability. Okay, so now this series is in fact printing the first 10 terms. The original way the code was set up, it was trying to print the Fibonacci series below a value 10, below the value 10. Now it's going to give us the first 10 series. In fact, it is very trivial to modify this code to terminate at this point, which was what we had in the original version of this code. Okay, but this is one way to do the same Fibonacci series as a vector. Okay, and you can also save this as a function, and let's say you wanted to have n as an input to a function. What you would do is, I'm going to copy the entire code, and what I'm going to do is open a new function. Okay, and I'm going to say out, and I'm going to copy the script here, and I'm going to get rid of this input value. Okay, this is my, okay, now let me try to save this. MATLAB picks a name for it, and for good reason. That's Fibonacci 3, and I can do the function call this way. Okay, so that's all there is. We'll talk more about functions and scripts later on. Okay, thank you.